have to say there's a funny ending to the gospel this morning. Those who ate were about 5,000 men, not counting women and children. Gives you the impression that the women and children didn't matter or didn't count, but that was the way it was in those times, and hopefully that has changed now. Now, just begin with a little story, funny little story, really. There was an elderly woman who lived in half of a duplex apartment. And next door to her lived the owner of the duplex, who was a man of no faith, no belief in anything, no religion. And very often he'd hear the old woman praying. There wasn't a very strong wall or division between the two apartments. And one day he heard her praying, "Oh God, please help me. I have no food in the house and I'm hungry. Please send me some food." And the guy next door heard her, and he ran around and left a loaf of bread outside her door, and then ran away. And she came out a little later and saw the loaf and was full of the praises of God and was thanking God for looking after her. Shortly after that, he came around and rang the doorbell and said, "You silly old fool, it was I who left that loaf of bread outside the door. It wasn't God." And her reply was, "Well, praise be to God, he never lets me down, even if sometimes he has to use the devil himself." Now, having a more serious look at the gospel this morning, and maybe, hopefully, giving you a new insight into the gospel, something that I have realized in the gospel myself and maybe not before. So, to paint the background or the picture, Jesus, we're told, goes away to a lonely place where he could be by himself. He was going through a sadness because he had just heard of the death of John the Baptist, and so he was mourning for John, and especially because of the unjust way in which John had been murdered. And so he wanted some time apart, sure as you often want some space, some time to do a little thinking. And then suddenly this vast crowd of people arrive. And what are we told? The immediate feeling Jesus has, he was filled with pity for them. So he forgot about himself and his own troubles, and he was filled with pity and compassion for the crowd. And then we're told he healed the sick. He healed the sick. Strange, not our idea of Jesus. The image we have of Jesus is he would give them a spiritual talk about how to get to heaven. No, he healed the sick. He was into what we would call today health care. Health care. Now, looking at health care for a moment, throughout the world, there is universal health care, except in one country. And guess what country that is? while you're actually living in that country where there is no universal health care. It's there for certain people, for people who can afford it. But for many, 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 many people, there is no real health care. And today, if you follow the news and read the newspapers and so on, because of the coronavirus, many people now are without health care because their health insurance has ceased or because they can't afford to pay their insurance. And so Jesus was into universal health care. Then it comes to, he was aware of those who were sick, but he was also aware of their immediate needs. And their immediate needs was, they were out in the desert and they were hungry. So he was aware of that. Now we think God is so far beyond us and that he's up there and all he's interested in is what we do wrong. How did we get it so wrong? How did we get our religion so wrong? And if you look at the history of the church and look at your own individual history, you'll be more concerned about sins. The fact that you told a lie or you did something else or that you had a bad thought or something. Jesus was never into that. He was always concerned about people's immediate needs, and he was the image of God. And so, since he was the image of God, that's what God is like. He's aware of our immediate needs. He's aware of you. He's aware of me. He's aware of what you're going through at the moment. That's real faith. You may not believe it, but that is the way. That's the God I believe in. Maybe not the God that you believe in, and many, many Catholics don't believe in, but Jesus is aware of what we're going through, and is always there to help us. Now, and the other thing, the disciples, the apostles, missed that point totally, because they came and said, well, look, how are you going to feed these people? And we get all involved in the miracle aspect of the gospel, that he fed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. That is not the important point in the gospel this morning. The most important point in the gospel this morning is give them something yourselves. They said, oh, send them off to the villages and they can buy food for themselves. No, he said, do something yourselves. Show care for them. A very important point. And whatever little we have, if we're willing to share, God will do the rest and he'll do the multiplying. That's how God works. You know, I was reading some statistics recently, and in the total population of the world, there are something like 6 billion plus people, and 1 billion plus live in dire slums every day of their lives. And each and every day, 100,000 people, or more than 100,000 people, join them in living in inhuman conditions, in dire slums. And that's where God is concerned. Have you noticed, and read the gospel, and come back and tell me if I'm wrong. Jesus never spoke in the gospel about the way to get to heaven. But he spoke time and time again about how we treat one another, not about how to get to heaven. God is involved in the here and now, totally involved in this world, because that is where we are here and now. And that's, before you deal with spirituality, you've got to deal with people's hunger and people's need. And that's what we ought to be about. Now, it gives me great comfort to say that I happen to be in a parish where we have a giving bank. And many people come there each and every week. And not just since the coronavirus began, but long before that. It's been going here for years. And many people depend on it. And many of you support that. That is absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful, because without your support, we couldn't achieve what we achieve here each week in the giving bank, and that is wonderful. But, that doesn't happen everywhere. And sometimes when we listen to our politicians and maybe to the present administration and government, you get the impression that there is no real compassion, no community. Take care of yourselves. But don't let us fall into that trap. That's the heart, and that's the core of the gospel that we have just read at Mass this morning. Look after one another insofar as you can. Look after one another. Be there for one another. That is the core message of the gospel this morning.